Let me turn it on. All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our South Carolina Arts Network. It's a pleasure seeing all of you this evening as you transition out of your work, but you're probably still at work because this is work related. But thank you for joining us for strategies for sustainable development plan. So we will have Mr. Bates Childress, who has decades of experience in the field of fundraising, including 15 years as a full-time in-house development professional and almost 40 years serving as a board member and volunteer for numerous nonprofit organizations. He has worked for healthcare, educational, arts, and social services organizations. And during that time, he has developed an expertise in the areas of strategic fundraising, planning, and the implementation of major gifts, plan giving, and grant writing, events, and direct response, which includes mail, telephone, email, and social media programs. Utilizing his broad range of development knowledge in 2022, Bates launched a Donorcentric Development fundraising consulting firm focused on helping small and mid-sized nonprofit organizations build diversified and sustainable fundraising revenue streams. So before we get started, I want to just go over a few ground rules, or house rules would probably be a better way of saying that, is that this will be an interactive presentation, so there will be times for you to ask questions as we go along. So feel free to use the chat or raise your hand if you have any questions as we move along, but we will also have some opportunities for questions and answers afterwards. But please be mindful and respectful of everyone's questions or opinions as we move along, because I want to make sure that we're creating a brave and safe space for everyone to participate. And then once we get to the end, if there is some free time and you have a specific question that's related to your organization, we will turn the recording off so that you can have that safe space there as well. So, Mr. Bates, the floor is yours.
All right. Ursula, thank you very much for that kind introduction, and thank you guys for joining us here today for this discussion. As Ursula said, my name is Bates Childress. My firm is called Donorcentric Development. I have 4 decades of fundraising experience. The first part of that was as a volunteer serving on boards, but for the last 16 years, I've been helping museums, colleges, other arts organizations, and hospitals and United Way organizations, helping them develop fundraising plans. And my focus, a lot of fundraising consultants are really focused on capital campaigns. My focus tends to be more on the annual fund efforts that organizations want to do. So that's a little bit about me. I started my consulting business about 1.5 years ago, and it really came from me, first of all, making a life change and moving from upstate New York, where I worked full-time for a hospital in my last full-time position, to Mount Pleasant. And because like everybody from Mount Pleasant, I'm not originally from there. And a change of focus. COVID-19 was a real wake-up call, I think, for all of us in the fundraising world. And I saw some things that I will discuss in this presentation that really made me realize that smaller not-for-profits would benefit from having more knowledge and education about the process of fundraising. So that's both what my business is about, but that's what this presentation is about too, is just kind of helping smaller organizations increase their fundraising capacity through best practices. If we could, I would love to hear from each of you a little bit about what your organization does and what your annual budget is for your organization. If you would care to share that. And why don't we start with Karen, because I think you were the first on the on the call, and then I'll just kind of move around.
Good afternoon.
And
I'm Karen
gallery
Wheeler,
here and ask those.
and I am
Yeah.
the director of South Carolina Art Education Association. And my basic income is probably between $20,000 and $30,000 a year.
Okay. That's your
And
your
we
budget for the year.
network, yeah, and we network with art teachers, and our main focus of income and also educating art teachers. We have a conference once a year.
Okay. Yeah. Gretchen, I can't see you. Oh, there you are.
Hi.
Okay. And you're with Piedmont Music Therapy?
Yes, I'm with Piedmont Music Therapy. Our budget's around $200,000. We're a new nonprofit, but that's almost all program expenses. So that's why I'm eager to hear the conversation, since we've not really done any campaigning.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Kathy?
Hey, I'm Kathy Cottingham. I am the ED for the Greenville Chorale, and we are a symphonic chorus, but we also perform things on our own with sometimes without anything more than a piano or an organ. We have a budget that varies year to year between 325,000 to about 375. And that honestly depends on how often we use a full symphony and whether or not we perform at the Peace Center in Greenville. Those are our biggest expenses, and a concert at the Peace Center costs us probably $75,000 to $80,000. We get about 25 to 30% of our income from ticket sales, and the rest of it we have to raise.
Yeah. That is right on average with performing organization.
Yeah.
So and Joseph. Can you
I'm with the CMFA, the Columbia Music Festival Association.
okay.
We act as a arts incubator in Columbia. We typically view the arts through a lens as an economic generator. People go to have dinner, then they go see a show, then they go out and have drinks, and all of our artists and performers live here, work here, spend their money here in Columbia. And if we can retain the talent in our town and in the area, then they don't feel the need to go to other markets to continue their career. They can stay here, local.
So you kind of froze on me there.
Yeah, sorry, my internet is a little unstable apparently.
Yeah.
But our general operating budget is 400,000, and a bulk of that is consumed by the facility that we manage, and insurance. Actually, as of the past couple of years, insurance has been a big one, pretty big expense.
Yeah. I think we've all seen that come up. So oh, there you go. I see your note there. All right. So we'll get started, and let's see. So can everybody see my building a four-legged stool intro slide there? So that's what we're here to kind of talk about, is building a well-rounded multi-stream fundraising program for not-for-profits. And let's see. Why am I not advancing? There we go. All right. So today we're going to cover a few things. First of all, can you all hear me okay? Give me a head nod. Okay,
Yeah.
great. The wonders of technology. I just got a note saying my mic wasn't doing very well, but as long as you can hear me, that's what counts. So what I wanted to cover today is kind of an overview of the not-for-profit landscape, and what that will do is help you kind of see where you are in the bigger picture. Talk a little bit about why fundraising is perceived as a mission critical activity for most not-for-profits, and the importance of setting some fundraising goals for your organization, and then talk a little bit about where the money comes from and how to structure that, how money gets raised, and how to structure a program so that you've got that well-rounded system that's going to generate ongoing revenue, as opposed to trying to do things on a one-time basis and then moving on. Right. Oh, there we go. I'm just a little slow. That's I don't know why this is reacting that way, but at any rate, so talking a little bit about it's funny because we did a test of this and everything went just fine. But I'm having trouble with my slides advancing or not advancing here, and I'm not sure why.
If you want to email it to me quickly, I can do it from my end.
Yeah. Now let's see. Okay. Now it seems to be working. Well, all right. Okay. So just to kind of set the stage or give you the big picture, there are over 1.4 million not-for-profit organizations in the United States. And that's a lot. A not-for-profit is defined by the IRS as a group that is organized for purposes other than generating a profit. So you have nonprofit corporations and you have for-profit corporations. And because you're not generating a profit, the money you raise is just basically for the operating expenses of your organization. You're not allowed to distribute that. And I bring this up for a couple of reasons. One is that a lot of people perceive of not-for-profits as only being charitable organizations, but they're not. Not-for-profits are also organizations like country clubs, homeowners associations. And let's see if I can there we go. That lighting's a little more even. So not-for-profits include things like your condominium homeowners association or chambers of commerce or country clubs, labor unions. All of those things are not-for-profit organizations. People don't typically think of them that way, but so that's part of the reason why there's so many not-for-profits out there. And basically, the difference between a not-for-profit and a for-profit organization is that for-profit organizations have owners, shareholders, and so any income, any excess income that a for-profit organization makes can be distributed back to those folks. If a not-for-profit has a surplus at the end of the year, that has to stay in your coffers. And a lot of not-for-profits are under this illusion that they're not allowed to make money. And that's actually not true. You can make money. You can run a surplus year to year. And in fact, having a surplus is a good thing. And we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. But Most not-for-profits have multiple ways that they earn income. And you guys just mentioned several of those within your introductions. But for instance, if you're any kind of a theater or performing organization, ticket sales are a huge part of your income. You may have membership fees. Educational organizations have tuition. Another way that not-for-profits make money is by having governmental contracts to provide services. So social service agencies that are providing services or educational organizations that are providing services sometimes benefit from government contracts to provide those services for the public good. So there are lots of, in addition to actual fundraising activities, there are a lot of other ways that not-for-profits earn money. I think it's important, and I think you guys probably all fall into this category. 92% of not-for-profits earn less than $1 million a year in revenue. So, people think of not-for-profits and they think of hospitals and they think of churches and they think of art museums and colleges and universities that have just huge budgets. But that is not the vast majority of not-for-profits. So, and out of those 1,400,000 organizations, 75% of them consider that donations, that fundraising is essential to their work. Smaller organizations are even more dependent on those charitable dollars, on those gifts and donations than larger not-for-profits are, because they have less flexibility, they have less wiggle room. And 30% of not-for-profit organizations fail within the first 10 years of operation. Just by show of hands, how many of you are more than 10 years old as organizations? All right, so congratulations to all of you. Gretchen, I can't see you on camera, but you're, I got you. That's okay. But the best of your compadres all raise their hands. So that's impressive. You made it through that first decade of struggle. And that shows tenacity, and actually it gets easier to raise money the longer you've been around, because you're a known quantity and people have confidence in your organization. So it's a very good thing. So why do not-for-profits need to raise money? We just said 75% of them consider it absolutely essential that they raise money. So why do they need to raise money, and why do they need to do it in a strategic way? The first and most common reason they need to raise money is so that they can grow, so they can either purchase new equipment or replacement equipment, so that they can build out their facilities, and so they can launch new programs. A strategic important reason to raise money is to build financial strength. As I mentioned at the top, you can run a surplus year to year, and you can start investing in assets like a building or other equipment that you can carry on your books. And that financial strength becomes very important later on, because if you ever want to do a capital campaign for your organization, having a good, solid track record of raising money that you can show to a bank, and having assets, both cash in hand investments and physical assets like real estate that you own or that sort of thing. All of that builds your financial credibility if you're ever going out for a loan to look for a capital campaign. A lot of what I do is help organizations create strong annual fund programs so that when they get to the point where they want to do a capital campaign, they have a base that they can do that from. Another reason to have a strategic, multifaceted fundraising plan is that different donors like to give in different ways. Some donors like to give in certain ways by mail, or some donors might prefer to give by going to events. And they have, some donors like to give throughout the year. Some donors like to give one time at the end of the year. If you're on a regular calendar year financial calendar, you know how busy it is in December when everybody's making those last gifts before tax season starts. So, and then the final reason that it's important to have a fundraising strategy is to account for any budget shortfalls that may happen. Hopefully everybody does a good job of budgeting and things come in right exactly as they're targeted. Unfortunately, raising money for budget shortfalls is a difficult thing to do because people perceive that as some sort of fiscal mismanagement on the part of the organization. But in fact, if you've ever run a non-for-profit or any kind of business, things pop up. You get surprises. So nobody in January of 2020 was thinking that COVID was going to have a huge financial impact on their organization, but it sure did. Probably 2 years ago, you weren't really seeing what the impact of inflation was going to have on your operating costs this year. Many organizations, somebody mentioned the cost of insurance a little while ago, and I know, it's not a charitable organization per se, but my condominium association had to significantly raise our condo fees this year because we had to make up for a huge increase in our insurance. So you get those unexpected expenses that pop up, or sometimes revenue that you're expecting doesn't materialize. So if you're a choral group and you have to cancel a program for some unforeseen reason and you lose all that ticket revenue, that's going to impact your income for the year. So we don't like to have those things. They're hard to raise money for, but they do happen, and fundraising can play a critical role in smoothing out that pothole in the budget. So how do you build one of these programs? And the first step is to set a goal. Stephen Covey, the author, Habits of Highly Effective People, one of his habits was begin with the end in mind. If you don't know where you want to get to, you're never going to know when you get there, right? And you're also not going to be able to benchmark it and see where you are along the path. So you need to take that goal and you need to match it to a plan and a timeline. So you can say, okay, I know I've got a $300,000 budget and I need to raise 200,000 of it because only 100,000 is coming from program revenue. You start with that. I need to raise 200, and then you have to figure out, how am I going to raise that? What activities am I going to do? So that's your plan. And then adding a timeline to that plan so that you're raising the money, no matter how you're doing it, in a timely fashion that's going to match your budget goals. And at the end of the day, what you want to do is develop a plan that you can use and build on year after year after year. Does that make sense to folks? It sounds very basic because it is pretty basic. But it's it kind of underscores the importance of not just having one single activity that you do throughout the year that you depend on for all of your fundraising. So let's talk a little bit about where do charitable dollars come from, or who makes charitable gifts? And I'm going to start with the question of how much money did Americans donate to charities in 2021? And this is a multiple choice question. I have 4 answers up there, and I'm trying to think of the best way to do this, but I think we're going to go back to the raise your hand method, and who would raise their hand for that first level of Americans donated $4.8 billion in change in 2021. Any takers for that first item? All right. How about anybody think that Americans donated $48.48 billion, almost $48.5 billion in 2021. All right, no takers there. How about the 484 billion and almost and 850 million dollars. All right, I see one hand, two hands, third hand, the fourth hand. Okay, and the fourth option there is 4,848 billion, $4,848 billion. And the answer is everybody got it right. The just under half a trillion dollars, $484 billion was donated in 2021. I haven't looked at the figures for 2022. They don't change a lot year to year. It tends to be a couple of percentage points in any particular direction in any of these areas that we're going to be talking about in the future, but I'm going to break this down a little bit. And for the rest of the presentation, I'm just going to use the number of 485 billion and round everything up to the nearest billionth for the next part of the presentation. So who is making those charitable gifts? And they're, according to Giving USA, they break this down into 4 categories. The first being individuals, the second being foundations, the third being bequests, and the fourth group being corporations. Individuals account for 327 billion out of the 485 billion. That is over 2/3 coming from lots of individual donors. And I can't emphasize this enough, because I talk to organizations all the time that talk about, oh, we're going to raise more money, and we're going to do that by making more foundation grant requests and hitting up more corporations. And there's nothing wrong with doing that, but it's not a strategy for dramatically growing your donor base and your fundraising revenue. It's an important part of it, but the emphasis should always be on this individual giving. So the next biggest source is foundations. And they come in at $91 billion, or 19% of the total. But think about that. You have individual giving, and then the next biggest group isn't even 1/3 as much as the largest piece of the pie. And I'm going to show you this in a graphic in a minute. Bequests are the next largest source of donations at $46 billion. So 9% of the total, and literally half as much as what foundations account for. And finally, corporations come in at $21 billion, which is a lot of money, but it's only 4% of the pie. And I think a lot of people are under the misconception that corporations are huge contributors to not-for-profits. They are not. And that's why I'm saying a strategy for massively growing your fundraising base is not going to be, it's not realistically going to be just from corporations. It's going to take a whole well-rounded approach. So here's a graphic of what that looks like for those of us, and you guys are all in the arts, so you tend to probably be a little more visual than everybody else, but this light green area is individual giving at 67%. This next biggest group is foundations at, what did I say? I think 19%, bequests at about 9%, and the smallest group here is the corporate giving at 4%. That's a graphic visualization. There we go. So title of my presentation is Building a Four-Legged Stool, and this is kind of an illustration of what I'm talking about. If you had a choice of sitting on one of these stools, you know, which one would you pick? And clearly the four-legged stool is going to be the most stable, and the same is true with fundraising. The more revenue streams, the more types of ways you're going out there, the more different kinds of donors you're going after is going to build you a more stable, dependable base to work with. So I've got columns here. I wish I knew how to whiteboard this in PowerPoint. It's something I have to learn how to do. But right now I'm putting this kind of here as a place marker. And what I would love for you guys to do is take yourselves off mute for a minute, and maybe I can just kind of walk through each of you. And aside from, you know, we talked a little bit about program revenue, and we talked a little bit about ticket sales for events, performing events that you do. But I want to focus, and events can be part of it, but not events. A fundraising event is different than like a performance, which is an event that raises revenue, but it's not a fundraising event. That's what you do, right? That's your mission. That's your purpose for existing. So what I'd love to do is just kind of have each of you give me an example of one or two things that you guys do to raise money for your organization. And I'll start with Kathy, because I can see your mute is off.
We do have an annual fundraiser event. It is scheduled this year for April 5th, so we're coming right up to it. This year I decided to send an invitation to anyone who has made any kind of donation or purchased tickets to any of our concerts for the last 5 years. And I went 5 years back because we had a very large gap due to COVID, those 2 years that we did not perform. I was a board member before I was the ED, and have observed over a span of about 15 years that our fundraiser event will only bring in 3 to 5% of our annual budget. I don't know what it should be or what is typical, but that's what we tend to get. And it's really hard work to gather items for a silent auction, to plan entertainment, and to get people to come to your event. So sometimes I wonder whether it's actually worth it.
Yeah, I'm smiling because you just gave a whole segment of my talk. So
I'm so sorry.
We'll come back to exactly that point. So, Karen, what's something you guys do for?
We have membership into our association, so that brings us in about 50%. Then we have staff development conference, a large conference every year, and some mini conferences. And now we're doing grants. So.
All right. And Gretchen, can you offer anything you guys do?
Yeah, we
to raise
do.
money?
We do online continuing ed events because we're an approved provider for music therapists. We sell color-coded ebooks and apparel. We have a little PMT swag sweatshirt because grants have not been fruitful. So we have been attempting grants passionately with zero yield.
All right, Joseph?
A bulk of our funding comes from granting sources from the city, the county, and the state levels. Of course, we do have a number of individual donors that donate each year. But like I said, a bulk of it comes from those local grants.
Yeah. LaRushelo, do you have anything you'd like to add that you guys do?
Let me unmute. Well, since we're a state agency, we give the grants instead of
Yep.
receiving the grants, but we do have some partnerships with foundations to support additional activities outside of our normal giving.
Okay, and you guys make grants, right?
We do.
Yep. Okay, cool. All right. So essentially, outside of programming types of activities, there are 4 ways of raising money. One is pure fundraising events where, I'm not talking about ticketed concert events if concerts are your thing, but having a gala or having an auction or doing some of those things Kathy was talking about, a golf tournament, a 5K. Well, we'll get to this in just a minute. I'm a little ahead of myself. The next way is major gifts, which is sitting down and asking people for money. The next way is grant writing, which a few of you discussed, and then there's direct response, which is what I call shotgun approach to fundraising, but it's an important one. So yeah. Yep. So just catching up on the chat box down there. All right, so here are some examples of what I'm talking about. So events, as I was mentioning, golf tournaments, galas, raffles, 5Ks are very popular ones. I put Christmas trees down there, but Christmas trees, any kind of product sales that you're doing, a lot of organizations, many arts organizations will have a gift shop. And all of those are considered fundraising activities. But they stand out a little bit from the 3 other categories to the right there, in that all of those event activities are transactional activities, right? They're not philanthropic gifts. Somebody is giving you money in exchange for an opportunity to play golf or an opportunity to have dinner at your event and listen to wonderful music, and or they're putting a bid in on a raffle item that they hope to walk away with something. Raffles kind of fall into the same category. But my point is that there's a transaction going on there. Major gifts are more philanthropically motivated. People aren't giving to get something in return, other than the feeling that they get out of that. And we can talk about that later if we have some time for it, but those are truly philanthropic gifts where there's not an expectation of getting something in return. And those gifts are coming from individuals primarily, but also corporations sometimes do that, especially if they're privately held corporations versus publicly held corporations. So the owner of those corporations have a lot more flexibility in how they can spend money. And sometimes if you can have somebody who it's easier for them to write a check out of their corporation than it is out of their personal account. Donor advised funds are a big source of major gifts these days. Those are charitable dollars that donors have set aside specifically for the use of providing that money to not-for-profits. They get a tax deduction when they set up the donor advised fund or make a contribution to the donor advised fund. It could be years before they say, okay, I want to help XYZ organization with that money. But that is an increasingly popular way of making larger gifts. Another increasingly popular way of making large gifts are through IRA rollovers, or they're also called qualified charitable distributions. And in those situations, once an individual hits the age of 72 years old, they are required to take distributions from their IRA accounts, whether they want to or not. And some people I will probably never be one of these people, but some people don't actually want that income. And what they can do is essentially divert it from their pocketbook into a charitable organization's pocketbook. And since they never receive that money as income, then it also doesn't count against them as a tax time. So if you have high net worth donor prospects, that's a way they might be able to make a stretch gift to your organization. And bequests, we talked about that whole I think it was 9% of charitable contributions coming from estate plans, and so that's another source of those major gifts. Aside from bequests, but they can be. Bequests frequently come in, you have no idea they're coming in the door. They just arrive at your doorstep one day and you're like, whoa, what's this? Christmas in July. But you can create campaigns to go after all of these types of donations. Grant writing is another important source of income. We were in that graphic I showed you, what was it, about up in the close to 30% of charitable money comes from foundations. So there are several different kinds of foundations. There are family foundations, which tend to be small local foundations, and that's probably your best source for foundation gifts. The next best source would be community foundations. Down here in the Low Country, the Coastal Community Foundation is the one that pops to mind. There are other foundations around the state of South Carolina that are kind of umbrella foundations. And then there are corporate charitable foundations. So larger corporations like Walmart and Target and places like that have foundations that they use to make local gifts too. And then finally, government grants. And I think, Joseph, you were saying that's probably where a substantial amount of your funding comes from. And then the final category I wanted to touch on is direct response. What I was saying is the shotgun approach. So that's doing things like direct mail, telethons, email blasts, social media campaigns. And the email social media is an area that's growing in popularity for fundraising. Telethons are I don't want to say they're a thing of the past per se, but they're dying because so many people have changed from landlines to cell phones that those numbers are no longer publicly available, and so it makes telethons a really tough go. But direct mail remains a very steady, popular way of raising money, and there are a couple of ways you can do that. I'm going to kind of talk about the pros and cons of I don't know if you've noticed this, my chair rolls and I keep getting further and further away from my camera and the microphone. So I apologize for that. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the pros and cons of each of these types of events. So for event fundraising, where you're charging an admission price to get into something, whether that's a golf tournament or a gala, or you're selling a raffle ticket or any of those other things, they can be great public relations opportunity, a way to get your organization's name out in the public. For instance, I'm working with a hospital right now that's doing they have a car dealership that donated a Toyota RAV4 to the organization to raffle off, and the amount of press that they've generated out of this thing is great, and it's specifically to raise money for nurse education. So it's something that the local press kind of picked up on and is promoted, and that's been really nice for them. So that's a great positive public relations opportunity. Events are a great way to introduce people who aren't familiar with your organization to the organization. So if you have board members that bring their friends to an event, it's an opportunity for an executive director to talk about all the great work that your organization is doing, the impact that it has on your community, and share some of those stories about how your organization has accomplished its mission or made your community a better place to live. And really kind of sell yourself to people that may not know you that well. And by that same token, just bringing new people, just the process of sending out invitations gives you a way to build future mailing lists by getting past attendees, board members, people like that, to provide you with names of their friends or people who they think might be interested in attending an event that you're having. Events generate a large number of medium and small gifts, depending on the event. Events are also an opportunity for corporate sponsorship. Most corporate dollars, you remember, corporate dollars are only 4% of the whole pie, right? And most of those corporate dollars come in through sponsoring events. Corporations see an organization that's doing something and they want to publicly attach their name to it. It's great public relations for them. Events are a great way to get your board involved by asking them for names and addresses and information of people who might want to attend an event, hopefully getting them to actually ask their friends to attend the event. And that for most board members is a pretty good, easy entry-level sell, if you want to put it that way. There are some disadvantages to having events. Events can be a source of bad public relations. Same hospital I was talking about a couple of years ago was coming under scrutiny for their fiscal management, and the press was giving them a hard time about salaries for top staff members and that sort of thing. And the local TV station showed up at their gala with cameras to film all these people coming into this big fancy event, and with the band playing in the background, and the slant of the story was, this is where the hospital is wasting its money. Instead of taking care of people, they're entertaining their big donors. Well, if there's a lot more to it than just simply that, but it wasn't a great look for the hospital. All that depends on your organization, and different organizations are going to have different public relation concerns, but it's, good, bad, could be either one, depends on how it works out for you and how you handle it. And Kathy did a great job of hitting some of these points. Events are incredibly labor intensive to put together, both from the planning process to the actual execution, the week or so beforehand when you're getting everything ready, to the event itself, and then the follow-up. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. There's just no way around that. There also can be a very high cost per dollar raised. Golf tournament would be a good example of, if you're charging $125 to play golf in your tournament, and your greens fees are $85, and then on top of that you have maybe you're providing them with a lunch or a dinner afterwards, that $125 fee for playing a round of golf disappeared pretty quick, and you might walk away with $25 per head. When you look at that, what your final net is it really worth it? You really have to think hard about that. And then you may come to the decision that it's not worth it as a fundraising event, but it is worth it as a publicity event. It just depends on the point of view, but it's important to understand, are you having a fundraiser to raise money, or are you having a fundraiser to raise awareness? And those are two different things. And you want to be very, very clear about that. One of the things you have to watch out for events, if you have a lot of volunteer involvement, budgets can get out of control. People can spend money that you weren't planning on them spending on your behalf. They either want to be reimbursed, which is going to cost you money, or they're going to be unhappy, which can result in nobody likes disgruntled volunteers, right? And then the other issue with events is the risk factor. If you have a golf tournament and you have a hurricane or a rainstorm hit in the middle of your golf tournament, that can really have a negative impact. I think we all saw this mostly with COVID-19. People who were organizations that were heavily dependent on event income just got crushed in 2020 because they couldn't hold the events that they're used to holding. So my takeaway is, don't let events prevent you from pursuing other faster, more cost-efficient ways of raising money. Major gifts, the pros are that you tend to get large gifts. That's why they're called major gifts. A major gift can be anything that your organization says it is. So for some organizations, $100 might be a major gift. For other organizations, $100,000 might be a major gift. So it just depends on what's a large gift to you. But basically, the way I tend to look at it with a not-for-profit is look at your donor list and take about 15%. I'm sorry. Take your donor list, the total amount raised, and what you'll find is that about 85% of that money comes from about 15% of your donors. And those donors are the people I typically consider my major donors. And you really want to spend a lot of time and effort keeping in close contact with those major donors. If you're an ED, you should be having lunch or coffee or somehow sitting face to face with one of those major donors, at least your top 12, at least once a month. In other words, one of those top 12 donors every month, not to ask them for money, just to talk about the organization and what's going on in it, and to make them feel involved and build that donor relationship. It's usually pretty fast, I should say, to raise major gifts, because really it's a matter of sitting down with that donor, talking about what their needs are and how they would like to help you. And usually you can walk out of after one or two meetings and have a commitment from them for that year. And those meetings, people are hesitant to do them, but you have to understand that those meetings really serve a purpose of strengthening your relationship with those major donors. They are important to your organization, so you have to make sure that they understand and invest in what your organization is doing and feel comfortable with you, and feel confident about what they're investing in. And that takes time. That takes a little bit more than just an annual fundraising letter, right? But the good news is it's fairly inexpensive. I mean, usually you're talking about the cost of lunch or a cup of coffee, and 9 times out of 10, the donor is going to offer to pick up the tab for that anyway. So, and this is a great activity you can get your donors involved in. I am quickly burning through time, so I'm going to speed up my spiel a little bit. The biggest challenges with major gifts are asker hesitancy. People don't like to ask for money. I can help with that. And it can take years to cultivate a major donor. So you want to look at all the people who gave you $100 last year and make a special outreach to them. And maybe next year they'll give you 250 instead of 100. And you just keep working with them to keep moving them up the ladder. Grant writing, again, large gifts. Typically, you can take one narrative created at the beginning of the year and cut and paste that information into most of your grant requests. So you're not starting from scratch every time you write a grant. That's also an activity that can be subcontracted out to a consultant or a grant writer. And when you do that, instead of having to pay somebody in-house, a salaried employee who may not be familiar with grant writing, hiring a professional, it's typically money that's pretty well spent, unless you're experienced at doing it. And a lot of times you hire a grant writer to write a grant for the XYZ Foundation one year, you can use that same format year after year and kind of fill in the blank yourself. So the challenges with grants are they tend to be hit or miss. They can take a while to hear back from. I just spent a month writing 2 grants that were submitted last week. And we won't hear back from those 2 foundations until May. And probably won't see any money until June from those. Grants tend to be very time sensitive. Most organizations have specific dates. You have to have that grant in by. If you miss that deadline, you're done. You're finished. Wait till next year. And you can also spend a lot of time and effort researching grants to find the ones that are going to be the best fit for you. And then just finally, I'm going to hit on direct response. This is the best way. Direct mail is the best way you can build a donor base. Just accumulate as many lists as you possibly can from people who attend your events, from board members, from anybody that you think may be interested in what you're doing, going out and meeting with your local service clubs, things like that, and collecting cards. And so at least there's a contact. So when they get that email or that letter from you, they'll know why. They'll relate it to something. You can also buy prospect lists. That tends to come at a pretty high cost. Sometimes you even lose money on those first few mailings, but if you pick up donors, they can continue generating revenue. Direct response is easy. It's very systematic kind of a fundraising effort. And then also you can get board members involved in giving you names and addresses and stuff. So it's a good board involvement activity. And let's see where I am. So just in summary, to have a well-rounded, sustainable fundraising program, you want to set up a campaign goal, create a plan and a timeline with that plan so you can track yourself throughout the process. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. You want to have multiple ways that you're asking for money. So do some events, do some major gift fundraising, do some grant writing, do some direct response, do at least 3 of those 4 activities every year, and then be consistent in those activities because consistency over time is what's going to generate a strong annual fund going forward. And I took it right to the edge there. So I didn't leave a lot of time for questions and answers, but please feel free to use any remaining time. And I'm happy to stay on for a few minutes if anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask. Anything?
All right. Karen, did you raise your hand, Karen?
Yeah, the begging for money, he made a comment about it's quite easy. Could he give us some ideas of how to accomplish that?
I think I meant easy, easy from a process sort of way, but I'm going to actually, let's do, if you guys can take a couple of minutes, I want to do a little activity with you. And this will just take a minute to do, but it'll kind of maybe do a little mental reset on that concept of what you just said, begging for money, because that's what a lot of people think of fundraising as. So I want each of you to think of an organization that you feel passionately about, and not the organization you're representing, something else, something that you're connected to that you feel strongly about. Think about that organization. Think about what it does, its mission, its impact, and visualize yourself writing a check out, making a donation or maybe going online and making a donation, a meaningful donation to you. And think about how you feel after you make that donation. How making a gift to an organization makes you feel. Knowing that you've impacted how that organization can accomplish its mission. And if you start to approach fundraising from that point of view, that you are giving donors opportunity to feel good about themselves, to feel good about what they're doing, to feel good about having an impact on their community, it really kind of changes your mindset when you go in and you sit down to talk to somebody about your organization. So that's part one of how to make it easier, is just your own frame of mind when you're walking in that door. You're not begging them for money. You're giving them an opportunity to feel good about supporting your organization and making a difference. And that, when you talk to donors, that's why they like to make gifts, because they feel like they're making a difference in the world. So you're just providing that opportunity, first of all. Secondly, I'm a big fan of going in and talking about, what your organization does, what the impact is, what your budget is, how much money you need to raise, and asking, first of all, is this something that you would like to support? And then asking them, what level do you see yourself supporting at? And I mean, if they answer the first question, no, then we're done here. And nobody's feelings are going to be hurt. But if they say, yeah, I want to support what you're doing, then the next logical question is, well, how can you help us? And sometimes, if you put it that way, how can you help us? Sometimes it'd be like, well, I can host an event for you, or I can, it may not be a financial contribution. Another fundraising trick, there's an old adage that when you ask for money, you get advice. And when you ask for advice, you get money. So in that meeting with somebody, it's always great to say, what do you think about what we do with our organization? What do you think about the impact is? What do you think we should do differently? And most of the time they'll go, no, I think everything's great. But at least they appreciate being asked their opinion. And it gives you an opportunity to ask for advice and suggestions. Sometimes they can give you really great advice. And sometimes they can offer some really crazy stuff. So, so that can be very entertaining. But I hope that answers your question a little bit about how to make it easier, because that's part of what I do is work with individual board members and board members as groups, executive directors, fundraising staff, in how to go through that process, how to do that. And that's one of the biggest challenges is asker hesitancy. That fundraising faces. I have a lot of respect for all of you, because you're all in positions where you have to wear a lot of different hats. And if you might be the executive director, but you're also the HR director and the IT director, and the finance guy, and you end up having a lot on your plate, and fundraising, because it's not everybody's favorite thing to do, frequently falls to the side, but it's stuff you need to do. So that's why I started Donorcentric Development. That's my plug for the night. And thank you guys very much for coming. Any other questions? Feel free to pop up my next slide here, and I'll share the slide deck with LaRushla, and she can forward it to anybody who wants it. But that's my contact information, and I will send each of you a grant readiness checklist. I've got your email addresses, and I'll just drop that in the mail to you tomorrow. And it's just a little reference guide, so you can kind of look at the information that funders like to have, and will prepare you for writing more effective grants. So Anything else?
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. This session is complete. However, I do want to add one comment before we close. I will say that when I was in your position or serving as an ED for an organization, I created what I call tea and lemonade conversations. And I took the time to, since I moved to a different state in a new community, I had to take the time to get to know each of my members on a personal level. And because I created that, and I know it's very time consuming, because I created those tea and lemonade conversations where they could come into the office and talk to me, tell me about their grandkids or their granddogs and all of those things, and learn all of their names. Once they knew that I cared about them, then I could easily tap into their time and their resources and their finances. So I will say, even though it's time consuming, if you have that time to just connect on a personal level, it does help. So thank you so much for attending this scan. Please sign up for the next one for next month. And I appreciate you connecting with us. And Bates, thank you so much for your time and for being part of this network as well.
All right. Thank you guys very much.
Thanks.
Y'all have a good evening. All right, goodbye.
Bye.